Hey guys, Toolman Tim here. Welcome back to the workshop where we create community, find freedom, promote preparedness, and share success. It's February 27th, 2022, and this is episode 76 of the Workshop Podcast. Tonight, my guest is going to be the Intrepid commander, the CEO, James Walton of the Prepper Broadcast Network. He's going to tell us all about his journey. It's going to be a really good episode. Him and I chat all the time, so it'll be a lot of fun, but as always, we get a little housekeeping out of the way first. I got 3 quick announcements for you. Number 1, I'm beating this dead horse. You know what happens when we beat a dead horse? We get a bigger mess. But Telegram, if you're not on Telegram, go buy Telegram. Grab the link in the description below. Come and join the Workshop Telegram chat group. That is just the place where we share, interact, let each other know what we know. If we have questions, people throw things up that they don't know, we help give solutions. And we're going to start doing a live weekly chat in there as well. So grab that link, go over and join the Telegram Workshop chat group. Number 2, I've mentioned this before, but if you're wondering if there's any gear that I have reviewed before or that I recommend, and I gladly don't mind answering your questions at all, but if you're just wondering, run by toolmantim.shop. That's the quickest way. As of right now, I believe we got 230 items that I've used in my handyman business that have made me money or saved me money. So if you're just wondering, run by there, check it out. And even if you don't buy anything on that list, but if you start your Amazon shopping there, it'll support the channel. So thanks, guys. And number 3, if you are listening to this on the audio podcast forum, leave a review, number 1. That's the biggest thing you can do to help support this show. Absolutely. And also, take a minute and share it. If there's an episode that just absolutely jumps out and grabs you, take a minute, share it for me, guys. Get it out there. I know I've said it, but growth is like a 45-degree angle on the chart right now. End of the month, maybe I'll share a little bit more about it, but it's going great. So thank you. It's because of you guys. And if you have any show topics or guest suggestions for the future, send them to me at therealtimcook@gmail.com or go over to toolmantim.co and fill out the guest form. So with that, let's bring on Mr. James Walton. Hey, James, how are you?
Oh, man, it's a pleasure, Tim. Glad to be with you.
I'm glad to have you, man. This is great. What did we do? Spend 2.5 hours talking about the Ukraine last night?
Easy, right? Like shooting fish in a barrel.
Yeah, it was easy stuff, right?
Yeah,
so
it's always good. It's always good to get the whole crew on, but you're particularly easy to get involved in a myriad of conversations, and I appreciate that.
No problem. I don't know. What are they? Jack of all trades and a master of none. I always enjoy. I try to know a little bit about everything, and I think you're the same way, and I think that's why we get along and chat so much and enjoy our conversations.
Yeah. Well, I think some people just put effort into getting along and effort into the things that they do in general, and you're one of those type of guys. So things work,
I appreciate it. So who is James Walton? Introduce yourself. We always play the game of, first off, what was maybe your first job in high school? Where did you come from? Just give us some background about you.
Sure. Yeah. I grew up in a real crazy place called Marcus, Pennsylvania. It was a town built to support the workers of Viscose, which was the first company to make rayon fiber, which was like the first man-made fiber in the United States in mass production. So they built this village for their workers, and that's where I grew up. Later, the town was actually kind of taken over by oil. Sunoco showed up, then the workers went to Sunoco. So I had these big giant oil fields, not oil fields, but the big drums that hold the oil, and then the big torches that kind of burn off the great chemicals that you should breathe in all your youth, sulfurs and that kind of stuff. That town is kind of dying, and it's really sad to me, but that's how things go. First job growing up, probably one of the most important things I ever did, which was wash dishes at a local diner. I think I made $4.25 under the table, and I was the richest 13-year-old in, I think it was 8th or 9th grade. I always had money. It was crazy. Cash money. But dishwashing taught me everything, man. It's a crazy thing. It taught you how to hustle. It taught you how to work. So, yeah. And then my story is way too long to squeeze down. But basically,
worries.
I wound up running into the dream was to be a chef. I achieved it pretty early. You know what I mean? And I was right outside of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. So I got to learn from a lot of great people. And along the way, I ran into a young lady from Virginia who we have decided to name Lady Liberty here on the Prepper Broadcasting Network because, my show is I Am Liberty over there. So I ran into Lady Liberty and we moved to Virginia and things got crazier and crazier. And then one day I woke up and I was freelance writing for a living and talking to Toolman Tim on his live show. And it all seemed so surreal, honestly.
So go back, I don't know, you spent quite a bit of time in the restaurant business, did you?
That was my career forever, really. I mean, from 13 to about 24. Well, you could say from 14 to about 26, 27.
Pretty stressful sometimes.
All depends on how you handle it. You know what I mean? Definitely, I don't know. It's hard to look back at it with any disdain whatsoever, Tim. The work ethic, it taught me the organization, the timing, the ability to, produce under stress. There are a few industries like hospitality that crank people out that are just, really good at being people. You know what I mean? They're just really good at taking themselves and putting themselves into the passenger seat and saying like, there's something more important in front of me other than me. And so, yeah, I'm sure, if you asked me when I was 25 and it was 8:00 at night and I had a thing full of tickets and, the chef was yelling at me to get the steak up or to get the steak cooked up to the right temperature, I'd probably say, yeah, this kind of sucks. But looking back, it's been a dream, man. It was great. Taught me a lot.
Did you ever see that movie? I don't know. It's probably a decade old now. Ryan Reynolds was in it, called Waiting. I don't know if you ever did.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I worked at a Dairy Queen only for 2 years, but it was food service. And every time I watch that movie, it takes me back to those days because it was as stressful as all get out, but it was the most fun we had at the same time.
Oh,
you know what I mean?
Yeah, the fun in restaurants is unparalleled. I mean, the filth, the fun, you're working. And when, the closer you can get to a major metropolitan area in restaurants, the wilder it gets and the wilder the people you work next to get. Like I had undoubtedly an illegal immigrant who was my next of kin on grill. I had basically a radicalized Albanian Muslim next to me on the left, and between us was just a regular old American girl culinary student. And oh God, yeah. I mean, that's how wild it was. It was just a ball. Everybody got their licks in.
Seems like every person I've ever met that worked in a restaurant long term smoked. You weren't a smoker by chance, were you?
No, I've never smoked. No,
they always just, I don't know what it is. Do you ever the stereotypical?
I know what it is.
The stress.
It's a chance to get the hell out of the kitchen for 10 minutes. Yeah, for sure. I remember leaving Almaday Cube. I worked at a restaurant called Almaday Cube, which is one of the busiest restaurants in Philly, right? And I remember walking out at like 10:30, 11 o'clock, and I would sit in the back alley with the homeless, the homeless all up and down the streets in the back alley street. And I was going to college too in the morning, so the days were just epic.
Oh.
And I remember I'd be breathing and I'd watch the street and the street would be rising and falling like the city was breathing. And I would be like, whoa, I'm tired. So that level of exhaustion. Yeah. I'm sure people are like, let me go get a couple drags. I'm dying here.
When you said dishwashing, I can tell you a quick story. This is a good one, but my sister, I can't remember if it was her very first job, but she was like 14 and they were paying her cash to do dishes. And she didn't last her first day because she was getting behind and she thought it'd be a good idea to throw the silverware in the garbage as she went. So she's like, I don't have time to wash it. So she started throwing it in the garbage. And yeah, so not everybody can do it right away, but it's definitely, I've said a few times, I think everybody should work in the retail and the food service industry just for a chance, does
Yeah.
something to you.
Yeah, I brought several friends when I was 13, 14 into the wood chipper at Chai restaurant, and some floated, some sank. One of my best
Yep.
friends sank. I never forget it. He was so upset. But yeah, it was tough.
Just
But
stressed you out, you know.
it's
And then
huge. It's just huge what it
you met
teaches you.
Lady Liberty, and you got married, and you've had a couple of youngins in the intern, have you not?
Yeah, I got a 6-year-old and a 10-year-old, 2 boys. That was a big change in my life as well, Tim. There was a moment when I guess Carter was probably about 3, my oldest son, where I had one of those weird time left epiphanies. And I have those sometimes throughout life where I go like, oh, I got to pay attention here. This is going to be short and sweet. And that was one of the reasons I got into freelance writing, left a really good job with the local food bank, because I basically have this belief, Tim, that I got 10 years with each kid where they look at me like I'm Superman. You know what I
Yep.
mean? And
Oh,
after that, the divide just grows. So I said, I'm going to commit these 10 years to these kids, and I'm going to be the guy who takes them to school, picks them up, helps them with homework, all that stuff, and that's kind of guided my life for the last 6 of them, probably about the last 6 years. That's been one of my biggest guiding motivations.
that's cool. I love it. Yeah, and one of my 12-year-old twins is in the chat tonight, Charlotte. She's always in here, biggest supporter. She might still say I'm Superman, but she doesn't get too embarrassed yet, but boy, it's getting damn close, I'll tell you. No, she wouldn't say that.
Pappy
Man,
in there too.
I got 1,000 questions for you, but you brought up the freelance writing, so let's chat about that a little bit.
Sure.
So, guys, I got to tell you, this episode was a bit selfish on my part too, because I know James. I've known each other for a few months now, but I really wanted to learn more about you and Prepper Broadcast Network, because we'll get into the history of that too a little bit. But so yeah, tell me about freelance writing. How profitable is it? Do you enjoy it? How do you get into it?
Sure. I mean, so I'll take you back to 5th grade, but we'll be brief.
It's okay.
I hated school always hated school. And my mother knew it, and my sister dropped out of school. So it was, that was kind of the vibe. My mother dropped out of school. My dad made it through. But at 5th grade, for some ungodly reason, and it was definitely for the best. My mother was a huge Dean Koontz fan. And
yes,
she sent me to school 5th grade, I remember, with a book called The Fun House. And from that moment on, basically, there was that little spark of, I'd like to write books. I'd like to write. It'd be cool to write,
Yeah.
And years went on. I got, heavy into bunches of different kinds of literature and stuff like that. Wasn't big on history really at all, funny enough. Now I love it. But you get to the age, I think I was about 18, 19 when I wrote my first book that nobody cared about. And that was probably horrible to read right now. I've got a copy of it on my bookshelf, but I'll always keep it. And I came, it was one of those moments, Tim. I don't know if you ever had these moments as an entrepreneur. I was young and really kind of naive, but I remember clicking publish on that first book I wrote and then just being like waiting for the sales to roll in. You know what I mean? Like, this is it. You finished it. You edited it. Now it's going to be a bestseller, because I was like 19, 20 or something like that. And I very quickly came to realize that I better stay in the food service industry because it's impossible to make a living writing. And it was at the time. I mean, unless it was you had a degree in it and you'd worked for somebody big enough that could give you work all the time. And by 2016, or less, 2015 probably, Upwork, freelancer.com, guru.com, all these websites started popping on the market. And all of a sudden it was like, whoa, like I might be able to write for a living. You know what I mean? And I didn't really hate what I was doing. But at the same time, it wasn't like, can I wake up at my house and like stare out my window and write for a living? Is that something that could happen? And it did happen. I called my mother up. I said, Mom, do you think I should do this? She said yes, got her blessing. And then then it took, the arduous task on of building a base of clients that can actually pay some bills. And that was how freelance writing started, man. And I got to shout him out. He gets kind of a bad rap in the prepper community sometimes because he's a hustler. Um, there's a guy named Claudio. He runs a website called askaprepper.com. He
Huh.
sells a book called The Lost Ways, and The Lost Ways is a great book. And he was my first client. He's still my client all these years later. And he was the guy who gave me, he paid me enough money at the time where it was like, this might be an option. I was still working and I was writing for him too at the same time. And if I hadn't run into that guy, man, I don't know. That dream probably would have fizzled out. So it's always a sticking point. I thank him all the time, man. All the time.
That's
You're
awesome.
probably so sick of it.
It's how it goes, though. Like, I've got 2 or 3 customers that's the same way. And I think everybody gets to that point when you're starting some sort of venture. There's that make or break point, right? And you choose, okay, am I going to keep climbing up the hill, or whatever shit hit me today, I'm going to quit and go back and work for the man, And it almost always seems to be that if you hang on, I don't want to say this to everybody, but if you hang on just a little bit longer, quite often you find the success you're looking for, but it's tough. That, man, how long did you write and cook, or write and work in a restaurant at the same time?
It wasn't long. It was fate-ish. It got really ugly because it was really interesting. This was happening. My mother-in-law was fighting cancer at the time, and she was our babysitter. You know what I mean? So there was a little bit of forcing that happened too, because unfortunately she lost her battle with cancer. And that put us in a position where my wife and I had to sit down, and I basically had to commit to her, like, I'll figure out how we can make this work. My wife is no slouch, so it wasn't like I had to bring in all kinds of money to keep the house afloat. You know what I mean? She's a successful woman. But, not successful enough that I could just say, I'm just going to stay home and be dad and just do that and warm the bottles up. So we had to make money. But luckily, I imagine that I had done the preparation on the back end and was ready to jump ship. But yeah, once Joanne left us, that was one of the big motivators. It was like, let's just do it. Let's just try it and make it work. So, yeah.
If somebody wanted to jump into freelancer, obviously it's going to help to be a decent writer, but where would somebody start at this point?
Yeah, probably 2 of the best places to start as a freelance writer. Oh man, I wish I knew her name. There were 2 women on YouTube who I've also sent thank you messages to, who were incremental. I never had a conversation with either one of them, and neither of them got ever answered back to me. But I'll give you the information if you want to put it in the show notes. Absolutely. After.
Yeah.
One of them's named Jordan something. I haven't. She runs the Creative Revolt. But anyway, these ladies really, really set you up with what are the things you need to do to get started in freelance writing. The 2 things that I would say is, number 1, sit down, write a list of topics that you're pretty confident about you can write on. Don't stick with one niche in the beginning. You know what I mean? Try to really kind of have some things and some backups, So I would write, and take my word for this, because I started writing as a prepper and survivalist, which is not easy. You know what I mean? There's only so much out there. But I was a fisherman, always a big lover of dogs, obviously a parent. You know what I mean? Parenting articles can be a big one. So have a bunch of those ancillary topics that you can write on for when you go to your main niche and start searching for work and find out, oh man, there's nothing, that you can dig deeper. The second thing is, take the salary that you want to make, be reasonable, and work backwards from that to gain your hourly rate that you're going to charge people. I think early on writers, the biggest problem writers get into early on is, I want to be a freelance writer. I'm willing to do anything. I'll write your book for $50. You know what I mean? And just because, and that can turn into a really bad habit. And what I noticed with that, Tim, when you don't value your time, and you might notice this too,
I do.
you naturally put things behind other things in your head. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
I've been guilty of it in the past. I'll take a job for a guy who's not paying me hardly anything, but I wanted that job, or times we're looking a little slim, and naturally that job's going to fall back in your to-do list. And so you got to be careful about that. So you can take your salary and you can, I want to make X amount of dollars as a freelance writer this year. That's my goal. And you can divide it into months and all that kind of thing, and figure out what your hourly rate at least should be, or should look like, ballpark. You don't want to go in charging $10 an hour if you should be making 35 or 40 to pay your bills. And then you'll get a good read on your clients too, and what they're willing to pay for.
That's cool. Yeah, it works that way in the handyman business. I know early on, Jason Davis brought this up. I'll bring this so you can see it on the screen here, but he says it's okay to say no to work. It's a hard thing to do early on. And
Right.
in my all seasons maintenance, early on I took on some jobs that I just wanted the work, and I took it at like, I did a job that should have been like 1,300, and I priced it at 500. And you know what? You hate the job the whole time. Even if you're doing it, you're just like, oh, I just want to get it done. There's so much about it. And yeah, it's 100%. I've been there, man. Not writing, of course, but just jobs that you're like, it should have. And then when you're done and you do the after, I do a report, or I figure out how much I made per hour. Sometimes I don't even want to do the math because it was bad. That don't happen anymore, but it did for a long time,
Yeah, and it's hard. I mean, you can warn people about it, but if you needed that $500 for a bill, you're going to do the job. You know what I mean? And that happens too. That's part of that freelance lifestyle. That's part of working for yourself. Sometimes you need that bump. You don't want to take the job. You're going to take it, so you can get that money, even if you regret it for the next 2 weeks, 3 weeks.
So you said I guess we're going to work backwards a little bit. So you're into freelance writing, and obviously you said you're an expert in preparedness. You should be, if we'll get into that. Where did that journey start? I haven't asked you that question before either. So
that's a wild tale too, man. Woof. So I was in high school. I was, like I said, no school. Mm-hmm. I made it out of school. I did so bad in school by choice now too. I was one of those idiots that was a smart kid who just, I don't want to do school. You know what I mean? Uh-huh. I made it out of school by the skin of my teeth, and I still have nightmares about, like, I'm in 12th grade. Am I going to pass? So I really just made it out. I wouldn't have made it out if it wasn't for culinary arts vocational school, which I spent half my time at in 11th and 12th grade. That just absolutely saved me. I got to do what I'm passionate about, or I'm not really that good a person, to be honest with you. So, outside of cooking, fishing, and music, and writing and reading, right? The things that I was passionate about, outside of those things, I was frankly a useless man, but being into writing and poetry and and reading, and being in a band, I was good at relationships and good at girls and stuff like that. You know what I mean? That was always a real easy thing, because Shakespeare, Rossetti, all that kind of stuff, I know it. So that stuff always came easy. But the rubber met the road when I got married and bought a house. And just so I can quantify how far off the bar I was, like, when we bought this house that I'm sitting in now, I was 22 or something, like 24, maybe somewhere around there. I don't remember. But my father-in-law brought over a hammer for me, and it was the first hammer I ever had.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
I know. Yes.
So I was not a man yet. You know what I mean? I did a bunch of things that men kind of do, but there were some serious pieces missing. And I knew that. And I'd also really always been in love with sci-fi and doomsday and all that kind of stuff. And when my first son was born, we got hit by a hurricane called, I should know this. I don't know what it was. I don't want to slow the show up, but I give her a lot of credit. It was a woman. But Ida keeps popping in my head from Matter of Fact's podcast because I've heard so much about Ida. So my son's like 2 weeks out of the hospital, right? This is my first time, first son, first time being a dad. I'm a dad now. I've only been a husband for a couple years, only been a homeowner for a year. And we lost power for we lost power for a full week.
Mm.
And I had never experienced a hurricane before. I spent like a lot of time. There's windows right here. I spent a lot of time holding my son, just looking out these windows at the trees out back. Like, what in the hell is going on here? And in that moment, that was one of those breaking moments. You know what I mean? Where it was clear to me that there's a bunch of skill sets that you don't have that you need, and you better get to work. And because I was so given to that kind of doomsday stuff, I kind of somehow thought that, preparedness was probably the first one. And I guess I was scared into it.
Mm-hmm.
I wound up listening to the Prepper Podcast Radio Network. And the Prepper Podcast Radio Network, which is still around, it's actually called the Posh Radio Network now. The Prepper Podcast Radio Network, when I was listening to it, said, "We need hosts. Do you want to be a host at the Prepper Podcast Radio Network?" And I was a lead singer in the band, so like microphoning was no big deal for me, right? And being in front of crowds and that kind of stuff, it was like, I could do that. And I just basically took on the I Am Liberty show as I was just completely transparent. I don't know anything, and we're going to learn together. So I took that and leveraged it in my favor. And the rest really is history,
So was that part of what is PBN now, or was that a separate entity?
That was a separate entity, yeah.
So
Glenn Martin with the Prepper Broadcasting Network. I didn't start doing a show for him until maybe a year or two later.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how many years ago was that when you started on the radio network?
I guess it would have been 10, something like that.
Okay.
Yeah, I've been doing this podcast thing a long time. But it was always until, well, not always. The first maybe 4 to 5 years were, I'm using this to learn for sure. I learned early on. I learned a hard lesson about like, I think I'm doing something cool. Nobody's given me any any reason to believe that. So I'm going to get a sponsor. And I took a sponsor's money, and this is a word to the wise for you podcasters out there too. I took a sponsor's money. I sold nothing because I'm on the Prepper Podcast Radio Network, right? Which, I mean, I don't know what the audience was back in 2000 and what would it have been, like 14 or something. And man, that ate me up forever. It was one of those things, like, because they were this little food storage company that were family owned, and I mean, if they gave me like $100 or something, it wasn't like I took $2,000 off them or something, but I just remember that feeling and being like, okay, until you can make the people money you're taking money from, let's not try to be big professional podcast guy yet. So yeah, but it was about 2 or 3 years before I ran into Glenn, and Glenn said, "Hey, I do something similar, but we do it live."
That's cool.
So that kind of upped the ante,
And so that's when you started. Where to get, I mean, as a ignorant Canadian, maybe this means more to you, I'm not sure, but where I Am Liberty, is that from? Because I know there's an opening in your show. So for those who don't know, guys, James does a lot on PBN, obviously, but his main show is I Am Liberty. So where did you come up with that name?
Yeah, I Am Liberty was, so my dad was always pretty patriotic. One of the jobs I did in food service was I managed a soft pretzel bakery.
Okay.
And it was a sweet job. It really was. God, if I could somehow get those pretzels to people around the country, you just wouldn't even believe how good a Philly soft pretzel can be. But I would have to do deliveries a lot. And to be completely honest, I mean, I always listened to talk radio, but back when I was like 20 or 21, somewhere, I was not married yet. I don't think I had even proposed to my wife. I started listening to Glenn Beck I
Oh, yeah.
started listening to some conservative talk radio that my dad was listening to, and it just really resonated with me, man. You know what I mean? I don't know why. I didn't have much skin in the game at the time. I didn't have any kids. I wasn't married, none of that stuff. And, from there, it was like I would listen to it and I'd have so much in my head from listening to these guys that I had to get it out. And at the
Yep.
time, the only vehicle I had for that was writing. So I had to just, go home, start a little blog and type it all out. And that blog was called I Am Liberty. And
Ah,
then that died and was just totally not effective at all. So then I brought it back for the podcast. Same name,
we got,
That's some James trivia there. I don't usually tell that story very much.
I love that. That is my 100% goal of this podcast, is to get everybody to tell a story they haven't told before or haven't told in a long time. So that we've succeeded. We can finish. Yep. Have a good night, guys. No, just kidding. But
No, that's a good one. I rarely have. I still have the original logo I made and all that stuff. Wow.
it was
That's a wild one.
blogging was, we got Amy Dingman from A Farmer's Kind of Life's in here tonight, and her entire if I miss telling your story here, Amy, you can message in the comments, but I'm pretty sure she started as a food blog as well, or like a recipe blog, and then turned into the podcast, and the podcast kind of took a life of its own. And it seems like, I don't know, 10 years ago, blogging was where it was at, or at least it was, kind of, as blogging went up or as blogging went down, seems like podcasting went up. And I think what I love about the audio end of things is you can just take it wherever you want, and you can do it while you're doing 100 other things.
Yeah, it's all got its place. It
So
definitely does.
did you leave the radio network and go right over to PB or Prepper Broadcast at that point, or were you doing both?
Yeah, I did 2 shows.
Hmm.
I did the way I usually did it, and it was brutal. Newborn, all that kind of stuff. I was working, of course. This was making me no money. So this was just straight out of passion. But I remember I'd do my live show, which started at 9 on Wednesdays. No, Fridays. I started on Friday nights. Friday night live show at the Prepper Broadcasting Network. And then once that was over at 10, I'd stay up till 11 and pre-record the show that I was going to give to the Prepper Podcast Radio Network.
Nice.
And by that point, it was just the level of exhaustion was uncanny. I was working 2 jobs at the time. 6:00 a.m. I was working for a corporate caterer called Sodexo, and I'd be there till 3:00. I'd get an hour break. In the summer, I'd go fish this pond that I still fish to this day. It's such a great pond right by my wife's job. And then I'd go work at a place called the Wine Loft at night as a cook. And man, it was a grind, dude. It was an absolute grind. But yeah.
And still found time to do 2 shows.
Still found time to do 2 shows and everything else.
So
Jim,
anybody
too.
out there that's listening, if you're any potential content creators, remember, it's not easy. It's a grind, and you always got to find time to do it. It's there. It doesn't it's not easy. James knows. James, you put out, what do you do? A daily audio cast just about every day? And you do,
usually, unless Dave Jones mops it up for me, I do that. Yeah. That's fun, though.
We got Dave coming on next Sunday night.
Oh, is he really? Perfect timing,
Yeah.
man. Well, tonight might have been perfect timing for Dave, but
I've had him booked for a month, so it just sort of was, whatever that. Anyway, it was good. It was good timing. So he's going to come on and talk about building the shelter for anybody who's listening and is interested. So it'll be fun.
Dave Jones is one of the great guys of the world. I mean, really.
He's awesome.
If you come to Prepper Camp, you'll get to meet him, and he's a guy that I have no military experience. None, obviously, by telling you my story. I didn't even have a hammer. So no military experience. Dave Jones, 20 years in the military, slept in Saddam Hussein's palace. I mean, just crazy stories, crazy adventures, and teach, nuclear, biological, and chemical warfare for 20 years in the military. And I get around this guy when we hang out, And I've never once, and I know I say dumb stuff, I've had to have said things militaristically, tactically, these kind of things just come up as preppers,
Yeah.
right? You talk about stuff. I've had to have said things around this guy where he was probably like, did he just say that? Just from an
Yeah.
inexperienced standpoint. I just never feel like I'm anything but equal with that guy. He's so good at that. I mean, he just, it's wild.
He's
He's,
crazy down to earth. Like you
yeah.
forget that he has done so much and
Hmm.
knows so much. You're just like, I love it. I mean, I've only had a couple of conversations with him, but he puts you at ease real quick.
He's an amazing dude, and he's a warrior. I mean, he's in it. I don't know his age exactly, but he's older than us, and he works like he's younger than us. He's the man, Dave Jones.
I love it. Yeah. He's
Yeah, he's a good
inspiring,
guy for
S-
sure.
So okay, so then you started as a host on, was it was called PBN at the time, was it, or did it have a slightly different name?
Yeah, it was. Well, you know what? The weird thing about PBN back then is they were the Prepper Broadcasting Network, but they were also American Preppers Radio or American APN. They were connected because Glenn Martin, who was another absolute Glenn Martin was the real deal of real deals when it comes to survivalists. But his son operated a website called American Preppers Network. I think
Okay.
that's what it was. American Preppers Network. It sounds wrong, but it was something along those lines. And it was the first real sort of place to put together people with other preppers. That was the whole goal of that thing. Like you could start your own group. You could start the Pennsylvania Preppers Network, and it would just be Pennsylvania preppers who would talk on that forum and maybe meet and that kind of stuff. But that they were closely attributed to each other being father son. So it would be called American Preppers Radio, and then sometimes it would be called the Prepper Broadcasting Network. I still have those logos on the site. I'll have to show them to you sometime.
Yeah.
But it was essentially PBN.
Okay. And
Nobody
you
really
were,
called it PBN until I took over. I just turned it into a call sign.
well, I love it. PBN, Prep Broadcast Network, it just inspires, a media conglomerate, in the good
Mm-hmm.
sense, right? I like that.
Yeah.
And you and I have talked about branding a bunch and how important it is, but
Sure.
yeah. So how did it come about? How long? So you own PBN now, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how did that come out? I'd love to hear the story, and I know other people would too. How did you come
Yeah.
into it?
I was pushed into it again. Because I'm pretty cool with the status quo. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
That's probably another reason I was always I was always easy to hang out with when it came to girls, because I was always good with this whatever. What do you want to do? I don't care. Let's just do something. You know what I mean? The status
Mhm.
quo is usually pretty good for me. I'm resourceful and grateful for what I have, which are two. God, you got to have gratitude in this life. But anyway, I'm happy, right? I'm doing the I Am Liberty show. I'm writing. I'm good. I think at that time, what else was I doing at that time? No, I think that's it. I didn't have any other ancillary money making methods working for me yet. But, I wasn't rich by any stretch or anything like that. I'm sure I was probably hustling a little bit at the time, but I was good. And Glenn calls me up and said in November. No, he calls me up October 2018. And Glenn lives in Idaho in the Rockies.
Mhm.
Glenn has a book called Prepper Survival and Navigation.
Oh.
It's a phenomenal book. It's the perfect book. It's the only book I carry in my bug out bag because it's the perfect size, and the information is the front end of the book is very navigation heavy, which
Mhm.
really makes sense to slip it in the bug out bag, because nobody that I know is an expert with navigation. Everybody's kind of flirts with it. And it's
Yeah.
all it's all the methods, dead reckoning. It's all the stuff. And it's from a guy not who was like, let me research how to do this. When he was 16, he was taking hunting parties through the Rockies on horseback. All
Oh.
right. So yeah, Glenn was the real deal. And Glenn got kind of shut in doing PBN for like, a decade. And
Mhm.
he called me up in October. He's getting older, and he said, I just want to get back to the mountains. I just want to go back to the mountains with my dog. And
Nice.
either you buy it, because at that time I'd been with him for so long. You wouldn't believe it. And this speaks to how tremendous the hosts are here at PBN or at PBN. Sorry, I'm so used to broadcasting from PBN. That's why I keep saying that.
No worries.
The hosts are so tremendous here, man. And Pappy Cannoli can speak to this in the chat. It used to be a revolving door at PBN. I mean, we would have a host and they would be there for 3-4 shows. Then Glenn would say, yeah, I had to let him go. Or he didn't want to do anymore. We've had the same lineup of hosts the whole time since I ran this thing, except for maybe one. But she's gone on to better things anyway.
Yeah.
So it was at that point that he kind of came to me and said, I'm either going to sell it to you or shut it down. And, that puts me in a great position because I am already friends with Ryan. Ryan was still there. Dane D from the Gunmetal Armory was there doing his thing. Jordan was there doing her thing. And, everybody loves to podcast, and I had this weird communistic idea where we were all going to pay into it and we will all share the money. And then I realized a couple weeks into that, I talked to everybody about that and they were like, yeah, sure. And then I thought about it for a while and I was like, man, that's not going to work. Cause I am the guy with the time. I'm the guy working from home with no boss breathing down my neck. I'm naturally going to be the guy who takes on all the work. You know what I mean? And that's not a knock on them. It's just they're living life. They're doing this out of passion the same way that I did. So yeah, I said, sure, I'll buy it. And I bought it. I don't know. I'll tell you one thing that's funny about it. He sold it to me for $1,000.
Wow.
That's how bad he wanted out. So, it was a great investment on my end.
I mean,
and even if I didn't make any money, it's been a great investment, really, to be honest. But yeah.
So was Phil from Matter of Facts, were they on there at the time or have they come on since?
So when I started PBN, we had some nights where we had no shows.
Okay.
Monday, that's funny, right? Monday night used to be Medical Monday.
Okay.
So we would run the Herbal Prepper. We have archives of shows, Tim, that you've never heard probably, that are unbelievable. Kat Ellis, the Herbal Prepper, has a book on herbal medicine that is probably one of the best ever written. Kat Ellis, if you want to look her up. She used to do a show called The Herbal Prepper. We'd rerun her on Mondays. We always were close with Dr. Bones and Nurse Amy. We got a ton of their shows in the archive. We would run their shows and just, whatever medical stuff we could, we'd run on that day. Tuesday was The Next Generation. Wednesday was me. Thursday was Dane. Friday was a throwback show date where we would do older stuff from the archive because we didn't have a host. And the weekends were off. The weekends were off days. So that was it. We were all live. There was no pre-recorded shows. It was everything live. Wow. And we were on Blog Talk Radio, so everything sounds like this. It was horrible. Blog Talk. That was the first change I made immediately. I said, listen, everyone, I know we've got a lot of archived content here. I don't know if it's all going to make it over or not. But we're getting the hell out of here because you guys have good voices and you sound like you're talking to me on my mom's phone that hung on her wall in 1995. And that was one of the first big changes that we made, It's
like going from AM radio to FM radio.
Yeah, it was a big improvement, definitely.
Did you get all the archives over?
There's some really old stuff that what was the problem? Oh, that was a problem. Yeah, I didn't have enough funding to pay for the cost to keep a certain amount of megabytes at Spreaker when I first bought it.
Right.
So I had to bring over only so much because we were still pumping content out. That's a problem we've since solved, but I don't know that we lost a ton of great stuff. I did go back and download a bunch of it before we left Blog Talk Radio just for, on my own. But yeah, there's some out there. So every once in a while I'll get a request. I don't even know how I guess they get my email from the website, but every once in a while I'll get a request for some crazy show like I never even heard of. And really? I won't have the stuff. Like, unfortunately, somebody's husband passed away and he did a couple shows with us. I couldn't find him. I just didn't have them. They were a part of that archive that, we just didn't have
That's
the
one of
money
the
to bring over in the beginning.
craziest things about the internet is it's all electronic, and we figure, it just seems like it's always going to be there, but shit changes so fast. I'm sure there's more lost than's ever out there at this point, like just some of the early stuff. And were you around? Do you remember the GeoCities days? Do you remember
Oh
GeoCities?
yeah. Yeah, we
Yeah.
hosted our band website on GeoCities in high school.
Yeah, right. I did back in junior high. I had one of my first side hustles was I did website design for people
Oh
because
wow.
nobody else was doing it. Right. It was like 97 to 99. I did it, and everything was on GeoCities. And
Mm-hmm.
I did a website for a local independent wrestling federation, and it was the craziest thing. I mean, just to scan stuff, I had to use the scanner at the local in our computer shop at school, right? Because nobody even owned a friggin' scanner in
I
1990.
love it.
And then all of a sudden GeoCities was gone. And yeah, I know, like, I'm sure, and there is, if you go on, there was a website that tried to back a lot of it up, but a lot of it's gone, and you were talking about that early prepper, the prepper network, or
Podcast radio network, yeah.
where the guy was, where you could set up like local cells and things and meet.
American Preppers Network, yeah.
Do you remember? I don't. If anybody else remembers these, I think they were called rings or something like that. So at the bottom of a lot of websites back in the late 90s, you could click a button and it would take you to another website that was similar. So everybody was in kind of a group, and it would just kind of rotate you through like 20 or 30 websites all the same. And that's what I can't remember. I don't think it was called rings. It was something else. If anybody else remembers it, because I mean, Jesus, that's 25 years ago. But it was just
what keeps popping into my head is when you would get those scrollers that had words and stuff attached to the scroller. Like you would put like
yeah.
the company name would be attached, and you would scroll around and the words would get all fumbled, and then they would come back and say like, yeah, your business here. That was like one of the coolest things ever. Remember?
Oh man, the internet and it was all HTML. Well, mostly, right? And I did it all in a little notepad. And yeah, it was cool. And so then you've been 3 years with PBN. Well, I mean, you've been there longer than that, but you've been Intrepid Commander for going on. It'd be 4 years in October. Hey.
Yeah. That's a good story. You want the Intrepid Commander story? That's pretty funny.
I do. So in case anybody wants to know, yes, please. I love that story. I've only heard a little bit, but yeah.
Once you buy the Prepper Broadcasting Network, people are like, so are you the owner? How do you want to be referred to? Are you the owner? Are you the CEO? Like what are you? And I'm just too silly for that kind of stuff, man. It just seems weird. Like I would definitely not signature my website CEO or anything. Because I mean, it's a podcast network where most of the people do it for fun, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like that's the operation. Yeah, our audience has grown a lot, and we have an effect undoubtedly on people. But at the end of the day, that's kind of the layout of the business at the beginning there. And I was just like, man, I have no idea. And actually, Reliance, which the show that dropped today, is hosted by a guy named Stephen Menking. And Stephen Menking is like, he's a brilliant guy. He's given the majority of his life over to Jesus. This is like his heart and soul. And but he's also really witty, man, and funny and fun. And he was asking me that question because I was going on his podcast. He used to do a great podcast called On the Objective. He doesn't do it anymore. But you might be able to go to ontheobjective.org and get archives if you ever want to check that out. Really, really good stuff. And he says, what about the Intrepid Commander? Like in jest. And I was like, dude, that is just silly enough. That's perfect. So, from that moment on, it's been the standing. It's really hard to introduce yourself to new people, though, as a prepper, as the Intrepid Commander, when they don't know who you are, because then they go like,
this
the
dude
hell does this guy think he is? Yeah.
Way too serious.
But, it takes a very short amount of time talking to me to realize that I don't pride myself in walking around being called the commander.
You got to get the first time you told me that, what flashed through my mind, do you remember Master and Commander, the movie with Russell Crowe?
Oh
Yeah,
yeah,
they have the, I think it's like a blue. It's not a pirate hat because he wasn't a pirate, but it was like that,
it's
right?
like a tricorn type
Yeah,
deal, right?
they
Yeah.
get you one of those. That would be great. See what
Yeah,
we can.
man, it's all for fun. It really is, and it's great. I mean, it's taken on exactly the thing that I've wanted it to take on. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Where it's a fun thing. It just is, and it's not like oh, James the CEO's here, James the owner's here. People holler
Yeah,
people holler commander, and it's funny.
I love
It's
it.
always going to be funny. I mean, my kids just torture me about it. They think it's hilarious. Like, you don't command anything in this house. Why-
The only time I'm allowed to command at my house is when my wife gives me permission to do it.
That's it. That's usually how it goes, right?
So you've seen some growth. I mean, I know I have, but I like you to tell, like, things are growing at PBN. Hey.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, we grow in a bunch of different ways. The audience has changed a lot. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
We went through a period where we lost a lot of audience, and then a new sort of generation of listeners kind of moved in, I guess, or a new set of listeners. I think the nature of what we do, we have a little bit of a revolving door of listenership also. You
Hmm.
know what I mean? Because only so many psychotics are willing to listen to preparedness talk every single week. You know what I mean? Week
Oh
after
yeah.
week. So we experience those kind of bumps and stuff, but um the other, probably the most notable growth in my mind has been this roster of hosts and the content and the things that we do over at PBN that are always kind of evolving. Because we went from having, all this dead airspace to having almost two shows a lot of nights of the week now. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Sunday night, just a few hours ago, the Changing Earth podcast would have been on with Sarah Hathaway. So that's kind of the growth that has got me really tangled up right now, because we've reached a point at PBN where I don't know how to promote it all.
Hmm.
I mean, the I Am Liberty. When I jumped, I'll never forget this. Joe Prim from Prepare, Defend, Lead. I am not trying to name drop. These are just people that show up,
No, it's
you
great.
know, and I'm not trying to promote egregiously either, but he's a good guy down in Texas. When I took the I Am Liberty show off of Libsyn
Hmm.
and moved it to the Prepper Broadcasting Network, I closed my Libsyn account down. He said goodbye to it like it was the death of a thing. And he had really good foresight in that, because sometimes the I Am Liberty show is the same as it used to be, but just the sheer amount of stuff that is PBN related really did change the show. And I didn't see that coming. I thought I could still just kind of make fun of stuff and have a good time and not worry about not worry
Hmm.
about anything and give some prepping tips. Um, but yeah, that kind of growth is what's really blown me away. About a I'd say about I think we're about a year or a year and a half now, maybe. Well, about a year and a half ago, we started doing what's it called? Patreon.
Hmm.
Then the shutdown world started to happen. Not the shutdown of the so maybe it was longer than that. It must have been, I think it was 2019 we started Patreon.
Okay.
Cancel culture hit hard, and in my head I was thinking Patreon's going to go the way of everyone else. So
Hmm.
we quit that, and then we started a membership website. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? And because I owned it all, it was on my server. Nobody could come up to me and say, listen, you said some things that we don't like, so we're going to take your money making avenues away from you. And this is the core. This is like a core tenet of PBN. One of the core
Yes.
tenets of PBN, and one of the things that I'll never compromise on, is the hosts get on front of the mic. They talk about what they want to talk about, the way they want to talk about it, and I go to bed happy.
Yep.
That's 100% the situation. I don't invite people on PBN until I get the warm and fuzzies about them. And when I get those feelings, I know it's a winner. Um, So there's no point in me getting in their way, and I don't want anybody else getting in their way, you know?
Mm,
So we had to take the money making side of the business on and really own it, because I wasn't going to make money off YouTube. I knew it was going to come with that. And
mhm.
I think at the moment I'm about 3 days out from being off punishment with YouTube, so I can upload a video again.
Yep.
And that's running out. We're running out of time on that. They're probably just going to kick us soon, but whatever, it is what it is. So we were real intentional about that kind of growth too, right? Like, we got some audience, you know. We're at the point now where, and it's, I mean, I'm proud of this. I don't, you know, it's not Joe Rogan numbers, but we're at the point now where we do over 1,000 downloads every single day of people
That's
listening to either the show that hit the airwaves or the archives, you know.
Yep.
So that's a big deal to me. You know, we're gonna, you know, we might do 40,000 downloads this month, and we might do a lot more too, because it's been kind of bit busy lately with the you know, the closer we get to the end of the world, the better it is for us. Unfortunately, people start paying attention. But yeah, it's a lot of growth in a lot of ways, you know. And when you're new to this kind of thing, or if you're an entrepreneur, don't get completely wrapped up in just the financial growth. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like you could probably speak to this a lot because of the variety of things that you do. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
It's yeah, growth is growth. Enjoy it.
I mean, it's funny, we diversified a lot in the last couple of years, you know, like with my wife's daycare, that took up a huge portion of our time. And even, you know, I'd say probably a day a week, even for me to do different handyman tasks for her and that kind of stuff. And so my business shrunk a little bit this year, which was totally fine. I was okay with that because we kind of knew it was coming. But the growth over there more than eclipsed what shrank here, you know? So I was able to invest a little bit of time and get a big return. And yeah, it's cool. And like, so where do you, I mean, shoot huge, but I mean, where do you see it in a year, 5 years? Where do you want it to be?
Well, therein lies the problem, Tim.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's a part of me for sure that I understand the value of the message. I understand the value of, you know, your guys' time, which is very important. The good news is the roster of hosts have made it to a point now where a lot more of them are doing things that make money from the podcast. So,
Yeah.
you know, well, I mean, almost everyone at PBN has written a book, which is at
Right.
least one piece of the puzzle. You know what I
Yep.
mean? They've written a book, so that's at least one. But I'd like everyone to be in that kind of position where they're using their podcast the way that, at least somewhat, the way a podcast should be used, which is to generate some income from something. You know what I
Yes.
mean? It's just such a great vehicle for that. You know, it's really important. So there's a part of me, like I said, being the guy who kind of likes things the way they are. I'm completely happy with PBN right now. You know
Yep.
what I
That's
mean?
great.
I mean, I
Yep.
mean, in all honesty, life is the way that I want it to be, and it wouldn't
I
kill
love
me.
that.
It wouldn't kill me if it stayed like this forever. You know what I
Yep.
mean? Obviously, every new member makes a difference, you know, to overall financial situation, but we're solvent. We make money each year, and
Nice.
that's a big deal, you know. And PBN is not my main money making endeavor anyway. You know, freelance writing and writing will probably always be my profession.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, there's that part of me. Now there's going to come a time where, and what we have to harken back so you understand. There's going to come a time where my two biggest projects are not going to be a thing anymore, and that's Carter and Jacob. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? They're going to reach an age where,
Mm.
eh, you know, maybe not so cool to play video games with dad anymore or whatever.
Oh,
And I will go back to being the guy I was for sure, which is the guy who works two jobs and stays up till midnight, because that's the guy I am. You know what I mean?
mhm.
So the grind will never go away. I
That's a
don't
super.
know. Yeah, I don't know. I have no idea where PBM will go. I know right now we have the arsenal to and the times in front of us to at least be something that everyone should listen to at least a couple times a week.
Yes.
Again, I don't know that PBN is the type of thing that the majority of people would listen to for their entertainment every single day of the week. You know what I mean? But I don't know. We'll see. We'll keep hustling. We'll keep pushing out great content. We'll keep promoting it. We'll keep going on shows like yours to spread the word. And, I've got more people doing that kind of stuff now for PBN than I've ever had before. We've got 15 hosts in total over there, 11 shows. And like I said, growth is it's hard to quantify, like, what the value of you guys, the value of 15 people who are a hell of a lot like me that I get to, converse with on a weekly basis, meet with once a year. There's a lot of value in that, man. There's a I don't know how much money, or if there is an amount of money or amount of listeners that you could have in order to achieve that,
Yep.
So, but that's the kind of goofball I am. That's why I'm not rich.
We talked about that the other day, didn't we? I don't even remember when it was, one of our conversations. And that's the best part about our internet communities, is we get to pick like-minded people that, we might not agree on everything, but we have enough in common that our conversations are so damn enjoyable. We get to sit and pick each other's brains and, sharpen each other and disagree on some things, but to try to find, 15 people like-minded like that in your local community, it might be possible, but it'd be a hell of a stretch to do. And
then committing to talking to them every week.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Something along those lines. You'd probably get sick of them. I don't know. You know what I mean?
So this is something else I was going to touch on a little bit too, but because you do everything, like a bunch of different content, but it seems like one of your passions obviously is fitness and health, and you do like a behind the scenes show, or like a behind the membership show of prepper fitness and health. Mm-hmm. So, the reason I started Preparedness is because I felt like home maintenance and that kind of thing was an often overlooked area for preppers, just something people didn't think about. How do you feel about fitness and health? Feel the same way? It's a loaded question. I'm sorry.
No, yeah. My existence with fitness and health, man, is hilarious. I was the band that I was in high school, and sort of one of the like tenets of that group of friends was we were aiming to do as little as possible physically. Like, physical effort outside of band practice was frowned upon in our group. Like, we failed gym on purpose. Like, this was a thing, like, I'm not moving more than is necessary. It was like it was part of the thing. And once I broke free of those friends, you know how it is, right? Like, friends are good for you in some ways and nightmares in others. Once I broke free of those guys, I was kind of immediately alerted to, like, I need to be in shape a little bit. And then I met my wife, and my wife was a high level defensive hockey player in college. And she'd been playing ice hockey with boys her whole life. So naturally she was like, beyond fit, like strong. Like, she was probably stronger than me when I met her. And she was 5'2", you know what I mean? But she really helped me kind of embrace that fitness and go overboard with it. And now it's our lives. It's just part of our life. The gym is part of our lives. The fitness that we do, we work out at home together and all that kind of stuff. It's just a big part of our life. And when I first got into prepping, I was deep into fitness already when I got into prepping. And I was blown away by the backlash I would get when I would recommend it as a prep. You know what I mean?
Really?
Like, I would say, like, you really need to get in shape and be healthy because, everything that you're doing is resting on your shoulders. And they would say things like, my 38 is my fitness plan. I'll never forget that. That was a comment I got one time. Like, and I'm like, whoa.
That's a cop-out.
Yeah. Oh, I got all the cop outs for it. All the cop outs. It was wild to experience. So I've always been taking it to the prepper community with fitness stuff. And the one thing I never had time to do was workout stuff on video. You know what I mean? I could never justify. First of all, I'm not going to set a camera up at the gym and be that douche, right? So I'm not going to do that. And fitness is also like, it's damn near a religious experience when I'm alone doing it. And so it just never worked. Then when I found that this paying membership, all of a sudden I could kind of justify this fitness and health thing because, you know, it's work now. I'm not I'm not pushing work aside to go do this thing. And this year on Prepper Fit and Health is the first year where we're doing workouts. In fact, tomorrow's Prepper Fit and Health is I'm going to start teaching everybody how to use a kettlebell, which the kettlebell is the game changer. I got a bunch of them.
When you were tossing around the other day, it was like 90 pounds or some shit like that.
Bigfoot. Yeah, I got the Bigfoot for Christmas. Yeah, that's a 90-pound kettlebell, man. That thing is, yeah, that'll make a man out of you. I mean, it's, you know, the kettlebell can really mess you up if you don't know what you're doing. But once you know how to swing that thing around, it's a gym at home. You know, there's a lot of fancy machines that you can buy and Bowflex and Tonal and all that kind of shit. But the kettlebell, you could buy. Everybody listening to this podcast, I don't care who you are, what your background is, you can buy a 30, 25 even pound kettlebell. And I can take you right down to the 7th, 9th circle of hell with a 25-pound kettlebell. They're awesome. They're the ultimate value tool for fitness at home. You know, like, you got no money for gym, you got no time, you got no money to buy weights. You know, you can go get and they're way available now, man. They sell them at Walmart now. It's crazy. When I got my first kettlebell, a friend of mine, Antoine, oh God, Antoine was this guy who came into my life, enhanced my life, like took me to a whole nother level as a person from fitness and combat training, and then disappeared. I don't even know where he is now. He was one of those guys that just like hooked into me, changed me. Yoga introduced me to yoga, and then disappeared. So crazy. But yeah, kettlebells, man, outrageous. But yeah.
So if you're, I don't know, like you know, in the last, I don't know if I've ever told you this or not, but about 2 years ago, Becky and I started keto, and I dropped 110 pounds, and I've kept almost all of it off.
That's great, man.
So the health part's a lot better than it was, but the fitness, I mean, obviously I'm a handyman, so I work.
You're working, man.
Where does a prepper start? What do you, if somebody comes to you and's like, listen, you know, I got my water set up, I got my food set up, I got all the guns and ammo I need, I know how to garden, but I'm in shit shape. Where do you start?
I would say probably one of the best things that you can do, and you can get a ton of benefits out of it, even if you don't like the fitness. And I just did this because I was already into fitness. When I got to this house, I used to go to the library. I love the library still to this day. The library was where I was always at when I was a kid. And I would get the Peterson's Field Guide of Wild Plants. I think it's called the Peterson's Field Guide of Edible Plants is what it's called.
Okay.
You can buy it anytime. I don't know if it's the best wild edible book out there, but it's the one I started on. I took it out and then put it back and took it out and took it out and took it out for years until I felt like foraging was a thing that I could do. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And one of the ways that I used it is there's a park near my house, pretty close. It's a big 100-acre park. And I would take it in there and run in the woods, because running in the woods is one of my favorite things. And I would run in the woods and, you know, look at habitats, look at plants, pull over, right? Stop running and observe these plants up close and see, like, you know, this is what I'm looking at, right? Like, this is hazelnut right here. I can tell, even though there's no nuts on it, I can see the leaves. You know, those good field guides have all the parts and pieces of the plant. You can identify the plant without even the flower. But anyway, that takes a hell of a lot of time. If I was somebody who was going to start somewhere in fitness, I'd put a backpack on if I didn't want to run with some weight in it, or a bug out bag. I'd take that field guide and I'd walk in those woods, and then I'd get a twofer so that I was still intrigued and still interested in what I was doing, because fitness can be boring to people if they're not into it. I know that. So you can get something out of the book and out of the learning how to forage, which I think is an important skill. You should know the natural world. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
I mean, this is a human thing. I think humans should be able to look outside and go like, oh, oak tree, pine tree, willow tree.
Mhm.
You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
Some weeds and stuff that I know the names of. It's weird. It's really weird when you come to realize like people don't know what's on the planet that they walk by every day. There's such ignorance, right? It's tree. It's a weed. I don't know what it is. Like, isn't that weird? You don't know what you're living with? But anyway, that's a good way to get sort of the twofer, right? I don't want to work out. All right, well, maybe we're not working out. Maybe we're just wearing a backpack and walking through the woods looking at this field guide and becoming a forager, adding a survival skill to our quiver here, you know? And that's a low cost, easy way to start it, you know? And if you're already in a little bit of shape, you want to run, it's a great way to run. You should run in the woods anyway, man. You're surrounded by trees giving off oxygen and a lot of good stuff. You know, running on the road is kind of brutal on your body and your lungs and all that. But that'd be my tip.
Okay.
Cheap and
Yeah,
easy.
I love I tell you this one, you'll like this, but I love the library. That was my first real job. 3 years I worked at a library in high school from 97 to 99. And they called me Conan the librarian. So I thought you'd
That's
appreciate
sweet.
that.
Conan
Yeah.
the Librarian is an awesome name. That is great.
So
Yeah, the
you said
library was always a place of refuge, man. Always. It was the
so was
internet back then, you know? It's
that
hard for people to believe, but it was for me.
that
It was
yeah,
Google for me.
97. So the internet came to my town in about 95, 96. And I probably, so we had what they called the community access project in the library. And we had a T1 connection, which was fast for
I
back then.
remember T1,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And so, we were open. I worked every evening from 6 till 8, and I would book people in half-hour slots, and they would come in, and I would teach them what this internet thing was. I'd show them how to use the computer, and I bet you I taught 20% of my town how to use the internet. And they were all
Wow.
so scared. They thought they were going to, cause a nuclear meltdown or do war games or something. They didn't know, right? They figured they'd break something, and it was cool. I don't know. It was a neat time. It was a really, I don't know, the next time that will, probably not in our lifetime, that will be in a transition period where such a new technology that completely changes the world.
I would not doubt that, Tim.
So here's something else. You mentioned it, and I want to, maybe if you want to pick a little bit. I know you did a thing recently. You said about the park that's 100 acres nearby.
Yeah.
So, okay, if someone you want to get into living off the land or foraging and that kind of stuff, but because you live in a suburban area, would that be fair to call it suburban, or you
I'm
have
in the city. I'm in the city limits of Richmond, Virginia.
and how big is your lot? An
Point
acre?
eight,
Yeah,
point
so it's
eight of
small,
an acre. Yeah, small, real small.
but you've managed to kind of expand your usable land, right?
Yeah, in a big way. In a big way. I mean, there's a lot of things out there that require, and I hit the jackpot a lot too. I should
Mhm.
add that to my story. I really hit the jackpot a lot in life with big things. This house was not strategically purchased because I was a prepper. Remember, I was an idiot. Um,
You know,
but it just turned out that I back up into a public easement. I have this park at the end of this cul-de-sac here, and there's a lot of land that is you can go walk around and do stuff in. You know what I mean? Nobody owns it. It's state owned. It's along a highway and that kind of thing. Some of it. Um, but those opportunities are out there. Uh, there's a ton of stuff that you can do on public land. What is the public land situation in Canada? You guys have public land, kind of, right? You
yeah, we
got
do.
to with all those expanses of wilderness north
Oh,
of you
yeah.
guys.
There, yes. So there's more. It's more and less, I guess. Your guys' is a little more. It seems like, out like or at least like public lands or BLM, that kind of stuff. You guys,
Hmm.
it's very. It seems like at least it's advertised, or at least you can find it easily. We have it here. it's just not as put out as much, That's all.
Okay, I gotcha. Yeah, you got to know where you're going. Yeah, so I mean, when you head out onto those places, what I'm trying to do is talk and also figure out kind of the best ones to tell you about. Number one, obviously, is going out there and learning what's available in public lands and what can be had from a foraging standpoint. And remember, foraging it's not your number one means of gathering
Yeah.
calories.
Yep.
But there's a lot of stuff that you can do with foraged foods, and one of the biggest benefits, I think, when it comes to being able to recognize wild plants is the medicinal aspects of it, right? There's a lot of medicinal wild plants. There's also a lot of plants that are helpful with starting fires and that kind of thing. So having access just by the sheer consistency of walking into the woods time and time again with a book that can help you or a phone app that can help you, you can really kind of sharpen yourself up pretty quickly to be able to identify beneficial plants and trees and that kind of thing. One of the things that I do, and I don't know, well, there's two tactics that I use that I'm not 100% sure the legality of them, to be honest with you.
Okay.
But I'm just going to tell you because I don't really care that much, and I don't think anybody that hears it would care, even if they worked for the public lands or whatever. When it comes to the park, I don't take anything out of the park because that's a clear rule that's marked.
Yes.
But on lands that are public or public easement, things like that, we have a weird tree down here called the pawpaw tree.
Yeah.
And it's a tropical fruit. It's the northernmost tropical fruit. I mean, it goes all the way up to PA, I think, or even New York. And what I learned to do with the pawpaw tree is what you could do with any beneficial tree or plant at any time on public land, and I don't think you'd ever have a problem with it. And it's just kind of to favor those trees and to give them an edge in their natural habitat, so they grow big, produce fruit, propagate, and I get more of them. So in my yard and on my property, we got a ton of these things, but we also, just propagate them beyond there, out into the woods behind us, because I want a lot of those. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We do the same thing with hazelnuts. We want a lot of those, so we just help them. We pull weeds that are or other trees that are nearby that are competing, and I don't know that there's a problem with that. Now, what you don't want to do is you don't want to, like I said, you don't want to do this at a park where it's very clearly stated that you can't take anything out of the park, or else you will get in trouble. If you come out of a park like that with baskets full of hazelnuts, somebody's probably going to say something. If you're preparing for the end times and that's your only motivation, then probably not a bad move, because there's not going to be any game wardens around to say, hey, what are you doing pulling all those fruits out of there? Another interesting one, too, is, and you got to be careful about this because some plants are highly invasive. It's something called guerrilla gardening. And that's kind of taking plants that you want to grow, burying them, raising them in plots of land that are not necessarily yours, abandoned, or places like we're talking about, public lands, in spots that you can return to pretty easily and harvest. Now you got to be smart about it. You can't do things like plant tomatoes because you'll just feed the wildlife, especially if you're not there every day. But things like root vegetables, things like trees, things like trees are, you got to kind of change the way you look at trees. When I say trees to people, most people are like, trees, dude, they're everywhere. You know what I mean? Who cares? But strategically placed fruit and nut trees can produce a lot of food outside of the garden that you already have in your yard, right? And, plants, shrubs, great things like raspberry and blackberry. These things grow if you're down by water. They'll just go crazy. I planted a raspberry cane that was like this big when my son was probably 2 years old, and now we have raspberry harvest every year out back from that thing. So yeah, there's a level of there's kind of a tightrope you got to walk, right? And then you also got to do your due diligence, because of all the things that I do on that land out there. Just last weekend, when I was going over trapping regulations here in Virginia, I just now realized that you can trap, and this is written into the game book, you can trap in any state or county in the state of Virginia all year.
Really?
So that means that all that land that I'm telling you about right now that's close by is now it's trapping season all year there. And I guess it's because of nuisance species like raccoon and possum, but I didn't know that. So keep digging too. You might find
Yeah.
some gems that you didn't know about. So yeah.
Where I grew up, guerrilla gardening was the way that drug dealers grew. It was
Ah,
yeah, marijuana was always, it was never grown on their own land. It was always grown on, big open, well, forested plots or whatever. It was just one of them. Yeah, that was their way of doing it, and plausible deniability, and just that kind of
yeah.
thing.
There's a bunch of different. It's kind of a hippie thing where people, like, if you go into the city in like a median where they're growing useless dogwood trees or something like that, they'll plant little cucumber plants around that area. And that's
Yep.
how I first learned about it. And then I just kind of thought about it like, well, could we really produce food with it? And how could we really use it to our benefit? And actually, we started our community garden in our neighborhood kind of in that fashion, because we talked to the neighbors the sort of leaders of the community, but we had a park up there that was basically not being used whatsoever. And that's where we started our little community garden. So there's a lot of opportunity out there right under your nose, you know?
That's cool. I appreciate it. Yeah, I knew I'd dig a lot of stuff out of you tonight. This was good. So, so we've been we're an hour and 21. So I usually try to keep it an hour and a half or a little less. You know what I mean? But, so yeah, like where do people, give me the elevator pitch. Why should people come by to PBN? Where do people find you? That kind of stuff, James.
Well, prepperbroadcasting.com is the website. We do all the podcasts are available. You can listen to them there, but we are also on every podcast provider, just like any other podcast. Just search our Prepper Broadcasting Network. I don't usually say this kind of thing when it comes to Prepper Broadcasting Network, because I try to stay away from like the fear-mongering prepper stuff.
Yes.
But I don't even know if it needs to be said, but right now people need to be prepared.
Yeah.
Like if you can carve out one day of the week where you were to listen to content from the Prepper Broadcasting Network, I think it would do you and your future and the future of your generations a lot of good in a moment like this. It's just, I've never experienced anything like what we're living through right now on multiple levels. The nation, the culture, the beyond, the war, all the stuff, it's all happening. And none of it seems to me to look like it's ready to clear up anytime soon. So what's important to all of us at Prepper Broadcasting Network is to kind of pull people in, get them to listen, and get them to take action in preparedness. And
Yeah.
the reality of PBN is that there's no other place you can go where you get to hear 15 different points of view on prepping. 15 different points of view from multiple nations now, all over the United States, various demographics. It's, we're not here to sell a product or a thing. Everybody does their thing on PBN and speaks their preparedness sort of into being. So yeah, you can find us at any podcast provider, Prepper Broadcasting Network. Go to prepperbroadcasting.com if you like what we do and you start to really kind of enjoy it. As Tim mentioned, we have a whole nother side of content over at the membership side, and you can get involved with that. We're on Patreon too, and we're on YouTube sometimes when we're allowed. And I think that's pretty much it. Try to fall in love with the hosts. They're all unique, and they all have their own homes also. Oh, we are over at Instagram and Facebook and all that kind of stuff too, if you're into that. I really just like to post on Instagram. I don't do too much social media, but I like pictures and words. They're fun to play with.
I enjoy it. Yeah. Well, that's cool. Well, thanks, James. This was awesome.
Yeah, no problem, Tim. Thank you. This was
Yeah.
great.
anytime. I'd love to. We'll have to get you back again if you're up for it.
Oh, whenever you want, you let me know.
Right
You know, I'm
on.
sure we'll cross paths again.
I think so.
Eventually.
Probably 3-4 times this week, you know. But
Yeah, I think so.
cool. If you want to hang on for just a second, I'll wrap things up and
Yeah,
I'll be
sure.
right. Okay, cool.
Feel free.
Thanks, James.
You got it.
Guys, that was incredible. I love interviews. Sunday nights, I mean, I do preparedness all the time too, but interviews to me just, I don't know. It's fun to see a slice of life of someone else all the time, share their wisdom, sit down, have a good talk. And James brought his A game. Not that he never does, but it was just awesome, the stuff that he talked about. So we'll have him back. Maybe we'll do a round table with a bunch of the guys from PBN sometime. And we'll just, maybe we'll do like everybody's, top 10 questions about prepping, or who knows, doesn't matter. We'll have him back again. And it was awesome. And I've said it, but thank you, James, very, very much. So what's coming up this week? Where do you find me? I guess the next one will be Thursday night, Preparedness. That you'll get it here, but you'll also get it live on Prepper Broadcast Network as well. Thanks, Martinson family. Thank you very much, everybody who was in here tonight. Saturday morning might be a live stream. Just kind of depends on where the week goes. But if not, it'll be a pre-recorded episode for you. And then Sunday evening, this Sunday coming, 7 p.m. Mountain Time, I have another alumni of the Prepper Broadcast Network, Dave Jones, that we were talking about. He is an expert on everything nuclear, biological, and chemical. He's going to come on and just talk about building a shelter. This wasn't planned because of what's going on now, but it just happens to be that it sounds like it'll be a good thing to know. I love having people on that we can just pick their brains and learn from an expert. So anyway, guys, I say it every single week, but you only have so many hours in a week, and you choose to come and hang out in the workshop for an hour or two every week, and I appreciate it. So that's it for me this week, guys. As always, stay happy, stay healthy, and have a great week.